Hi guys, I'm just another guy named James, and today I'm going to be talking to you about a character who I haven't really talked to you guys much about before, and that is Superman. I'm going to be talking about one of the first Superman stories written by Mr. John Byrne himself. So you've already seen me talk about the first Superman story written by John Byrne, Superman Man of Steel. That's a video that's on the channel. It'll be linked in the description. But what's interesting about these Superman comics is they're kind of the return of Superman after Crisis on Infinite Earths. Another video you can see down in the description. But after Crisis, Superman needed to change a lot, because he was a little too goofy and nobody was taking him seriously. So these Superman stories written by John Byrne are kind of the first time that we really get to see Superman depowered. He's still super powerful, but he's basically been recreated as a new character. He's still Clark Kent. He's still, down on the farm, homeboy Clark Kent, who's a newspaper reporter. All of that is still the same, but Superman is less powerful, and he's meeting all of the villains for the first time. And in this story that we are going to read, it is his first post-crisis encounter with Darkseid. So we're just going to hop straight into the story, which begins with Clark Kent running away from Darkseid's Omega beams, but eventually Clark isn't able to avoid them, and so eventually they hit them, and Clark is transported to the feet of Darkseid. Darkseid then tosses Clark out the window because Darkseid's looking for Superman, and he doesn't know that Clark Kent is Superman. So Superman ends up at the bottom levels of Apocalypse, and he's able to fight his way up a couple of layers before he decides to wear a disguise. He's able to stealth around for a while until he comes across a mob getting ready to execute a woman. So he intervenes to stop the execution, and a giant robot called Pacifier is called in to fight Superman so that the execution can go through. And after a quick battle, Superman's able to crack open the battle armor, but the creature inside, which is just like this big alien goo thing that you're seeing on screen, latches onto Superman and drags him into the central fire pit of Apocalypse. And that's where our first issue ends. The next one begins with Superman being fished out of the fire pit, but he has no memory. He doesn't know who he is or why he's on Apocalypse. And we see the woman that Superman saved earlier, the woman he saved from being execution, whose name is Grace. And we see her begin to prop Superman up as the savior of the resistance. And, savior of Apocalypse, leader of the resistance against Darkseid. So Darkseid ends up sending in a bunch of parademons to fight out Superman and the resistance. But Superman is able to save the resistance, or as they're called in the story, the Hunger Dogs. We then see that Superman leading the War Dogs against Darkseid's forces in several battles, and the tide is beginning to change until eventually the Hunger Dogs win the day. We then see Superman give a big victory speech to the gathered forces with Grace by his side. But this speech ends with Superman signaling to several parademons to kill the now gathered resistance. We then see that Superman now believes he is Darkseid's son, so he's working for Darkseid. Now, to start the final act of our little story here, we see Orion of the New Gods. Orion is actually Darkseid's son. We see him come to Apocalypse to rescue Superman. We then see Granny Goodness, who is another pawn of Darkseid, like Grace, is testing Superman. We also see that Grace is revealed to be the brother of Glorious Godfrey, who is the primary antagonist of the DC crossover story Legends. And I don't know if you could see this at the beginning of the video, But these are also Legends crossovers. So this is Superman's story during Legends. So yeah, Grace is G. Gordon Godfrey's sister. Yeah, they're siblings. That's a whole thing. And next, Darkseid sends Superman to fight Orion, because Orion's entered the Apocalypse airspace. So Superman goes to fight him, but before Superman leaves, Darkseid decides to restore his willpower so that Superman can have full strength back. But that full strength means that he can now return to his own self. Orion and Superman begin their fight, but eventually Orion learns that Superman believes himself to be the son of Darkseid. So Orion then reveals his true face, and that he is the true son of Darkseid, which is enough to snap Superman out of his trance. So now Superman wants revenge, but Darkseid tries to get ahead of the game by launching his Omega beams at Superman, but he is able to redirect them, dodge them and get them to chase him, and he chases them back into Darkseid. Darkseid and Superman then proceed to just start beating the living daylights out of each other until Darkseid whisks him back to Earth using a boom tube. And the story just kind of ends there. Now, to some viewers who are a fan of good 90s TV, you may notice that a lot of this story sounds pretty similar to the finale of Superman the Animated Series, which is a great finale. There are a few differences, like obviously in the comic book story, Superman remains on Apokolips throughout the entire story. And Superman also loses, he doesn't lose, but he also doesn't win the fight against Darkseid. Now, in the animated series, Superman is turned against Earth, his adopted home, instead of just being a pawn of Darkseid on Apokolips. And at the end of this story, Superman also doesn't remember that he was Darkseid's pawn. Orion makes sure that he doesn't remember. And again, that's in the show finale, Superman actually has to live with the consequences of his actions. And that plays a major role in the Justice League show. So this story and that finale obviously compare really easily. I think the finale is the show finale is a little better. But I did really enjoy reading this story. I couldn't really put it down. But yeah, the story is, like I said, written and drawn by John Byrne. Or the beginning and end are written by John Byrne. The middle is written by Marv Wolfman, who you may know from Teen Titans. But overall, this story it's just good. It's not a great Superman story. But it's also not bad. We get to see Superman, being himself at the beginning of the story, and we get to see what happens when the power of Superman is misused near the end. And I really dig the fight between Orion and Superman. Orion really shouldn't stand a chance against Superman, but it still works out. But yeah, I don't know. There's something about this story that it just speaks to me. I just kind of like it, Yeah, I like Darkseid a lot as a villain because he's literally just pure evil, and it's really cool when we get to see Superman go up against him. And it's always really cool because Superman doesn't pull his punches against Darkseid like he does against everybody else that he fights. And that's something that's really enjoyable about reading or watching anything where Superman and Darkseid have a prolonged fight, But yeah, I think, that's really all I have to say on this. The story and the art are both good. The art's definitely a highlight over the story. The story's not bad, but something about the art just really speaks to me. You do have some weird one-off things like that character Grace. I don't think she ever shows up again anywhere, but she was just a means to an end in the story. So, like I mentioned somewhere in the video, this is technically a Legends crossover. Now, you can kind of see where and how, kind of, but not really. Like, this did not need to be a Legends crossover, is what I'm trying to say. And if you want to hear my more thoughts of mine about Legends, that's another link that's down in the description below. But yeah, overall, it's just a good story, you know? Like, it's a good story. It's one of the cheaper Superman stories, this entire run of Superman, starting with John Byrne and going all the way through the 90s, is an incredibly cheap run of Superman. Like, the most expensive issues are only maybe $5-10. So I would probably recommend it to anybody looking for a good entry point to the character of Superman. But yeah, I mean, I think that's really all I've got to say, and that works out because that's all I've got time for today. But yeah, anyway, I'm just another guy named James, and I will see you guys next time. Goodbye.